Okay, in this question, we need to find all values of a, if possible, or if any, so that a specific definite integral should be 0. And remember, if a definite integral is 0, it means that the amount of area that it measured that was above the x-axis is exactly the same as the amount that it got below the x-axis. So when it computes this area, it will give it a positive charge or positive sign, and anything below the x-axis, it gives it a negative sign or charge. And then the integral from, let's say, this point A to this point B of our charge, if you want charge, dx. So the charge is a function that they give it to you here. Usually they write it f of x dx. It will be just the area here with a positive plus the area here with a negative. So it could be negative and it could be positive. It just depends whether it's above the x-axis or below. So actually, if the whole graph is already above the x-axis, then the area will always be positive, of course. But if part of it is above and part is below, it depends on which one of them is bigger. The integral does not measure just the area, it measures the sign of the area, like it gives a sign to the area. That's why the answer will not always be this area plus this area. No, it's this area minus this area below the x-axis. So it could be 0 when the amount above here is the same as the amount below. Then when it gives one of them a plus and the other a minus, and you add them because they are the same but opposite in charge or in sign, then they become 0. Okay, good. So I'll erase this to solve the question. Now we want to find all values of a, so this happens. So let's integrate. What is this? So antiderivative of 3x squared is x cubed. Remember, it will be 3x cubed over 3 minus 12, and then antiderivative of x is x squared over 2 minus 7. Antiderivative to 1 is x, and this goes from 0 to a. But cancel the 3 and the 2 with the 12, so this is 6. So in any case, this is better to write as x cubed minus 6x squared minus 7x. Okay, so it is this between 0 and a, which means first put a in the formula. You'll get a cubed minus 6a squared minus 7a minus, now put 0 in the formula, but luckily all of them got 0 in them, so you'll end up just with 0 when you replace 0 in this formula. So the entire thing now gives you what? It will give you just this, and a is a common factor actually. So this will be a into a squared minus 6a minus 7. And you can still factor because this is quadratic. You just need to find two numbers that multiply to negative 7 and add to negative 6. And you'll find that they are minus 7 and plus 1. Then if you multiply them, you get minus 7, correct? And if you do minus 7a plus 1a, it will be the minus 6a. So it's correct. This is the correct factorization. Why did I factor it? Because they asked me to make it equal to 0. I know that, therefore you can say this here, let me give it a name actually. Let's call this star. So I refer to star. I would say star is the same as gave me that a times a plus 1 times a minus 7, which was the left hand side. You see, when I calculated the integral and replaced a, and then at the end I factored everything, so I got this answer. And they want me to set it equal to 0. You see, at the end they wanted this equals to 0. That will be star. This is the same exact thing as star. You can replace star by this and you have said the same thing. This exactly is equivalent to star, because this is what the integral was. Okay, so if the product of three things equals 0, implies one of them must be 0. So either A is 0, or A is -1, or A is 7. So 0, -1, 7. Those are my answers. Let's check. So how do we check? So let's first on the calculator check that it's correct, and then maybe I'll show you on the graph. In fact, here they say in part B, sketch the graph of the parabola and explain the meaning of your answer in part A. So they ask us actually to draw the parabola here and then show what our answer meant. Yeah, perfect. So this is what we're doing. But first, let us check that the three A's that we got really satisfy this formula. So this formula says the regular integral between 0 and A. So in this case, I have an A here, okay, and now I put the 3x squared. Better to put it inside, yeah, 3x squared minus 12x minus 7, okay, the integral. This actually, if you say equal, you get a cubed minus 6a squared minus 7a. So it is the answer that you already got here, but then I did one extra step of factoring it. First, you factor an a out, you get a quadratic, and the quadratic, it's easy to factor, so that you can find the zeros of it. So in any case, let's check that if I replace this a, see, if you replace it by anything, let's replace it by something that is not here. So, for example, 0 to 2 equals, see, -30, not the same as the number that I replaced. But if I put 7, let's put 7, I expect to get 0 back. Yeah, you get 0 back. You want to get 0 at the end. So 7 really gave me 0. How about 6? No, I'm telling you from now. How about 8? No, it will not. But 7, yes. And what else gives me 0? I said -1, so put -1. 0, good. And 0 itself, if you go in any integral from the number to itself, always you get 0. That's a trivial solution. But in this case, they told us that if you go to -1, you might say, but in this case, you're going from bigger to smaller. Yeah, this is the same as the negative of from smaller to bigger. So you can put from -1 to 0 here, and you'll get also 0, of course, because -0 is 0. But in general, if there is an answer, so for example, the integral from 2 to 0 is 30. Notice, but if I put from 0 to 2, it will be -30. Yeah, so it's the negative of each other if you switch the A and the B from here. But usually we prefer it to be the smaller down, the bigger up. But if it's written ever that the one below is bigger than the one above, then you can take the negative of it. Negative of the answer, and it will be the one that you want. So all of them are correct. We checked by the calculator. Perfect. And now we want to check by graphing the parabola. So where is Dismos will come to show us how to do it. Let's take these out so that we can graph ours. Now what is the parabola? It's 3x squared minus 12x minus 7, and the points that I want to show you are the points -1 and 7. 0, you remember an integral from 0 to 0 or from 1 to 1 or from any point to itself, it will not give you anything. It will always be 0. No need to understand the meaning of this. It's just by default it's like this. But -1 and 7 we can explain them. So look here. I'm going to show you. This is the parabola. It says that if you go from -1, we have to make it from -1 to 7 if we can show both of them. it's not simple, so maybe like this, negative 1 to 7, yeah, on the x-axis. So negative 1 to 7, it's telling you that if you go from negative 1 to 0 first, not to 7, sorry, negative 1 to 0, the area between -1 and this point is positive, and then from this point to 0 the area is negative, and it's telling you that the two areas are actually the exact same thing. So maybe I can put it like this. This area that you see that looks like a triangle here on this side from -1 to this point on the x-axis is the same as the area that you see here below the x-axis, but one of them is positive, the other is negative. That's why they cancel and they give you 0. The same thing happens. In fact, maybe I can do it easier this way. So where is 7? Yeah, we can show 7 here. Okay, now I take a photo and show you on the photo. Look, from -1 and then to 0, this part here, I'm saying that it's the same as this part here in area, but this one we gave it a positive and this one we gave it a negative. So when we take both of them, the integral from -1 to 0 of this function, we will get 0, because the positive and the negative are equal but in opposite directions in some sense, if you want. And 7 also, they're saying that if you go from 0 to 7, let's first delete the ones that we did here so that I can draw the one for 7 and go back to the pen and show you from 0 now, go all the way to 5 and look at this area. Of course, this area you'll give it what? A negative. This will get a negative. And now go to from 5 to 7. From 5 to 7 you have this area here that you'll give it a positive. And what we're saying is that these two areas are the same. This and this are equal. That's why we had the integral from 0 to 7 of our function equals to 0, because it had one area that was positive, another one was negative, and of the same amount but opposite signs. That's why the integral became 0. Okay, nice to know. And let's go back, and so this way we have solved it. It's just the graph that you looked at now and you saw the meaning. Remember, whenever you take the integral of something, so let's say between the point A and the point B, it will give a plus to the stuff that's above the x-axis, and it will give a minus to the stuff below the x-axis, computing the area, of course, but with a minus. So the integral from A to B of f of x dx will be, let's call this area A and this area big B. So it will be A plus the negative of B. Don't take the area of B as the positive of it, you take it as the negative to get the integral. The integral always doesn't look at everything as area. It gives also a sign. It goes from, if the area is, if the graph is above the x-axis like this part is positive. Anything above the x-axis you give positive to the area. So if your area is big A, you say that A as it is with a plus, but when it's given it will be a plus. And then B also, the area B is, any area is positive, but because it's below the x-axis and you're computing the integral, you'll put a negative for it. So you consider it as an area with negative charge, if you want. And then the total integral between A and B is the positive charge plus the negative charge. And let's say that this was 7, A was 7, and B was 5. Then you'll get 7 minus 5, which is 2. You'll get the value of the integral is 2, even though one of the areas was 7 and the other area was 5, you couldn't say 12. No, you need to check. If they're both above the x-axis, yeah, it would have been 12. But one was above and one was below, so 7 minus 5. If it was the opposite, by the way, if it was like this, the area, or the function, then A will give it negative and B will give it positive. So you'll say minus 7 plus, for B you'll put just positive. And so the integral will be negative, even though it's representing areas. But it's just saying that the amount below the x-axis prevailed or is more than the amount above the x-axis. And that's why the answer to an integral could be positive, negative, or 0. But if someone asks you to find an area, a specific area, you always give the positive answer, of course. Okay, and I will stop here.